Let me tell you about a Tuesday afternoon that changed how I think about everything. It was about 10 months ago. The house was in perfect order. The garden had been tended. The laundry was done. My routines were working exactly as they were supposed to work. And I was sitting at my kitchen table at 2:30 in the afternoon with a cup of tea that had gone cold, looking at nothing in particular, feeling absolutely nothing in particular. Not sad, not unhappy, not anything dramatic, just hollow. Like a room that has been cleaned beautifully and then left completely empty. I want to talk about that feeling today, because I think a lot of women my age know exactly what I am describing, and almost nobody talks about it plainly. We talk about the joys of retirement and the freedom and the peace, and those things are real. But the hollow thing is also real, and pretending it is not does not help anyone. What I discovered over the months that followed is that the hollow was not a personal failing, and it was not the inevitable condition of this stage of life. It was a signal. 5 specific signals, actually, that something was not quite right about how I was spending the time that was mine. 5 mistakes I was making, some of which I had been making for years without recognizing them as mistakes at all. These are those 5 mistakes and the solutions that actually worked for me. Not theory, not inspirational advice, what I actually did. Mistake number 1, treating retirement as the end of something rather than the beginning of something else. The cultural script for retirement runs something like this. You work for decades, you give the best hours of the best years of your life to an institution or a career, and eventually you earn the right to stop. The stopping is the reward. The reward is rest, leisure, freedom from obligation. You have arrived. I believe this story completely, and I think it contributed more to the hollow feeling than almost anything else. Because here is what nobody tells you about arriving. The destination stops being interesting once you have been there for a while. Rest is restorative when it follows effort. As a permanent state, it is something else entirely. Freedom from obligation sounds wonderful until you realize that some of what you called obligation was also what gave your days their shape, their weight, their sense of meaning. I had spent 7 years in my retirement treating it as the reward rather than as the next chapter. And the difference matters more than it might sound. Keeping the house beautifully, tending the garden, making this channel which I genuinely love. But all of it in the key of having arrived, of maintaining the good thing rather than building towards something. And maintaining is not the same as building in terms of what it does for your sense of being alive. The shift that changed this for me was deciding to go back to work, which I have talked about in other videos. 3 mornings a week at a nonprofit, doing work that is genuinely difficult sometimes, and that requires me to figure things out I do not already know. The decision produced the immediate practical effect I was hoping for, but it also changed something more fundamental. My relationship to this chapter of life. It stopped being a destination and started being an active, developing thing. You do not have to go back to work to make this shift, but you do have to genuinely begin something, not maintain something, not enjoy something, not rest from something. Begin something, something with uncertainty in it. Something where you might succeed or you might not. The beginning is what keeps a chapter alive. Tell me in the comments, is there something you have been wanting to begin and that you have been treating as something to pursue eventually rather than now? Tell me what it is. Naming it is the first step toward doing it, and you are among friends here. Mistake number 2, letting the financial reality of retirement quietly narrow your sense of what is possible. I want to talk about money because I think it is one of the least discussed factors in why this chapter of life can feel smaller than it needs to. My situation is comfortable. I am not in financial difficulty. But comfortable retirement income is not the same as working income, and the difference is felt not only in what you can buy, but in the way you approach choices. When money was less of a consideration, I made decisions without calculating them first. When money requires more attention, the calculation becomes part of every decision, and that constant calculation produces a certain narrowing. You stop imagining certain possibilities because the imagining feels irresponsible. You limit yourself before you have even considered whether the limit is necessary. This is the financial mistake, not having too little, but allowing the fact of having less to quietly rewrite what you believe is available to you. A trip you have been wanting to take becomes something to consider carefully rather than something to plan. A project you want to invest in becomes something to defer rather than something to begin. The financial constraint is real, but the self-imposed narrowing beyond the actual constraint is also real and is entirely within your power to address. Going back to work for me was partly about this. Not because I was in difficulty, but because having a meaningful income again, even a modest one, changed the quality of my thinking about what was possible. It is not primarily about the specific amount. It is about the freedom of mind that comes from having some capacity to invest in the life you want to live. Financial autonomy is one of the foundations of personal autonomy, and protecting it matters at every age. Before I continue, a quick word. If you enjoy this channel and want to support my work, just look directly below the video player, right next to the subscribe button, and click the button that says Join. That is how you become a Smart Organizer. Smart Organizers members get exclusive videos, a loyalty badge in the comments, and custom channel emojis. I would love to have you there. Mistake number 3, filling your time with activity rather than filling it with meaning. This one is subtle, and I want to take some time with it because I think it is one of the most common ways that capable, organized, well-intentioned women waste the years they have most carefully arranged to make their own. Activity is not the same as meaning. Activity is what fills hours. Meaning is what fills a life. They can overlap completely, but they also can fail to overlap almost entirely. And a busy retirement that feels hollow is almost always one where activity and meaning have drifted apart. I was busy. The house, the garden, the channel, various commitments that had accumulated over years. My calendar had things in it, and yet there was the hollow. Because most of what was filling my calendar was activity in the maintenance mode I described in the first mistake, keeping things going rather than building toward anything, managing what existed rather than creating what was not there yet. The question that cuts through this is one that Yuki asked me once. In the quiet way she asks things that turn out to be significant. What is something you are doing right now that you could not have done 5 years ago? It is not asking about improvement in an abstract sense. It is asking whether your life is actually moving, actually developing, actually accumulating something that was not there before. It is a deceptively simple question, and the difficulty of answering it quickly is itself informative. A life that is genuinely developing in the right direction tends to produce a quick, specific answer. A life in maintenance mode tends to produce a long pause. When I tried to answer it, I found it harder than it should have been. And the difficulty of the answer told me something important about where the hollow was coming from. The solution is not to do more. It is to examine what you are doing and ask honestly whether it is growing anything, whether it is taking you somewhere, whether it is the kind of activity that, done over a year, produces something that was not there at the beginning. Not every hour needs to answer yes to that question, but some of them need to. Tell me in the comments, is there something in your current week that you would say is genuinely growing something? Not maintaining, not managing, but growing. I am curious how many people find this easy to answer and how many find it difficult. Mistake number 4, treating your health as a background concern rather than an active priority. I am not going to repeat everything I've said in other videos about movement and diet and the specific habits that contribute to physical well-being at this age. What I want to address here is the particular mistake of treating health as something you deal with when problems arise, rather than something you actively tend every day. The active tending approach to health is the one that produces the best outcomes at this stage of life, not the crisis response approach, where you wait until something is wrong and then address it, but the daily maintenance approach, where the time and effort go in before anything goes wrong. The parallel to home maintenance is exact and intentional. A house tended daily in small ways stays in far better condition than a house addressed only when something visibly breaks. The hollow feeling, I came to understand, has a physical dimension as well as an emotional one. When my body was less active than it needed to be, the physical flatness contributed to the emotional flatness in ways that were hard to separate. When I started moving more, the physical and the emotional both shifted, not dramatically, not immediately, but consistently over weeks. The mistake is treating health maintenance as something you will address when you have more time or more motivation. You have the time now, and the motivation follows the action, not the other way around. This is perhaps the single most important thing I have learned about building any new habit at this age. You do not wait for the motivation to move. You move, and the motivation to keep moving arrives inside the moving, usually within the first 5 minutes of having started. Begin moving and keep moving. Please subscribe if you are not yet subscribed. Every week I share what I have learned about maintaining a home and a daily life that genuinely works at every stage. These conversations matter to me, and I am glad you are here. Mistake number 5, waiting for the right conditions before fully inhabiting your own life. This is the one that underlies all the others, and I want to give it the attention it deserves because I think it is the most consequential and the most invisible. Waiting takes many forms. Waiting until the house is more organized. Waiting until the finances are clearer. Waiting until the health situation is more settled. waiting until the children are in a better place, waiting until you feel more ready, more confident, more certain that the thing you want to do is appropriate for someone at your stage and in your circumstances. The waiting is not dishonest. The conditions that are being waited for are often real, but they are almost never actually necessary for the thing being deferred. They are the story we tell about why the thing has not started yet, a story that becomes self-reinforcing because the waiting produces the evidence for the waiting. The more you wait, the more it seems like there is still more to wait for. I waited 7 years after retirement to begin something genuinely new. Not 7 days, not 7 months, 7 years. And I want to be honest about what those years cost, not in terms of suffering, which they did not involve, but in terms of what was not built, not created, not accumulated during them. The hollow I described at the beginning was partly the feeling of the gap between what those years could have been and what they actually were. What ended the waiting was not the right conditions arriving. It was the decision to stop waiting for them. The job I found 3 mornings a week was not a perfect fit from the first day. The first weeks were uncomfortable in the way that beginning something real is always uncomfortable. I was uncertain. I made mistakes. I figured things out I had not known before. And the discomfort of being in motion was so much better than the comfort of staying still that there was no going back. You are not waiting to be younger. You are not waiting for more energy or more time or more certainty. You are waiting, in almost every case, for permission from a source that does not exist. The permission is yours to give. The life you have been imagining is not available in some future version of your circumstances. It is available in these circumstances, now, today. What it requires is not better conditions, but a different decision. These 5 mistakes are not unusual. They are not signs of weakness or poor judgment. They are the predictable result of a cultural story about what this stage of life is supposed to look like, a story that does not serve most of the women living it. The story says, arrive and rest. The truth is, there is more arriving to do, and the resting is more genuinely restful when it follows real effort rather than substituting for it. The hollow that I felt on that Tuesday afternoon 10 months ago was the most useful thing that happened to me in years. Not because it was pleasant, because it was accurate. It was telling me something true about the gap between the life I had and the life I was actually capable of living. And it was loud enough that I finally listened. I want to hear from you now. In the comments, tell me which of these 5 mistakes you recognize most honestly in your own life right now. Not the one that sounds most familiar from a distance, the one that is actually true for you today. That recognition is the beginning of something, and beginning is what this whole conversation has been about. And please subscribe if you are not yet subscribed. Every week I share what I've learned about living fully and keeping a home that supports you at every stage of this life, not the polished version, the honest one. I will see you next week.